My scariest home alone story happened during one of the first times I was left alone as a teenager. I was left alone at home on a random Sunday when my parents brought my brother to some event. I was loving the freedom, and everything was going great until I decided to leave my house to see my friend. My parents specifically told me not to leave the house, and I did anyway, not thinking in the moment. I left my house, and I completely forgot to lock the door. I came home hours later, and I had a terrible gut feeling. Something felt weird, and I noticed that cabinets were left open, and stuff was scrambled around the house. I began to become very startled, but I didn't completely believe that someone was there because it was so quiet. I started shouting throughout the house to see if anybody was there. There was no answer. I started to feel better until my phone started ringing. I looked down, and it was an unknown ID. Looking for attention, I answered the phone, and I heard deep and heavy breathing. I started to get extremely scared. It felt straight out of a movie. I kept asking, "Who is this?" repeatedly, until the phone hung up. 2 minutes later, I got another call, and I answered to the deep breathing. It sounded like an angry voice, and I started to become impatient that they weren't saying anything. They hung up again, and I got aggravated. I got another call from the unknown ID, and the breathing started again. Out of nowhere, I heard a deep and quiet voice whisper, "I'm in the house." My heart stopped, and chills ran down my spine. I've never been so scared in my life, but I acted tough, thinking it was a prank call from my friend or brother, knowing I was home alone. The caller hung up this time, and I started to hear creaking from upstairs, and suddenly I heard loud footsteps. Luckily, I heard something drop before he started sprinting downstairs. I was able to get a head start on the intruder, and I disappeared into the woods and immediately called the cops. The cops reported, and they found the door left wide open. They never found the person that snuck in, but I'm lucky to be able to share that wild story. I was 14. It was an average night around 9 p.m. Me and my little cousin were at his house. I was babysitting for the night while my mom and aunt were shopping, and my dad and uncle were at the movie theater. So, we were sitting there and I was feeling really strange. Something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it, so I just kept watching TV with my cousin. The feeling wasn't going away, so I got up and walked to the back door to lock it. When I came back through the kitchen, I saw what was causing my weird feeling. In the window, there was a very decrepit and homeless-looking man, just staring into the window and looking at my cousin. Protective mode turned on. I pretended like I didn't see the guy and told my little cousin that we needed to go upstairs because our parents would be home soon, and they wouldn't want him to be staying up late. So, I went upstairs and put him to bed, knowing damn well that there was a man outside who wanted in. I was about 125 pounds and 5'8" at the time, and I played football for my school. If I remember correctly, I went downstairs and straight into the kitchen, grabbed one of those meat tenderizing hammers, and turned back to the window where I saw him before. Not there. Ran back to the front door and checked that it was locked. Both the deadbolt and the knob were locked. Ran back upstairs with my meat tenderizer and went into my cousin's room, sat down in front of the door. He asked me what I was doing, and I said that he didn't need to worry about it and that he should keep his head low. Called the cops, and then my dad and uncle. The cops would take half an hour, and my dad and uncle were 45 minutes away. Then I heard a window shatter and the sound of heavy boots walking around on the main floor. I told my cousin to stay calm, hide under the covers, and to keep silent. I could hear the guy walking around downstairs. It was horrifying. I gripped that damn meat tenderizer and waited. About 5 minutes passed, and then I heard the boots walking upstairs. At this point, I was having a freaking heart attack. My cousin's door is no more than 10 feet from the stairs. I heard him opening the doors to my aunt and uncle's room, then the bathroom. He walked back downstairs, and I heard him open the door to the basement. 15 minutes later, the police showed up and burst into the house. It turned out the guy was loose from a mental hospital 1 province away. I have never been the same after that experience. I wasn't technically home alone. My friend was spending the night at my house, while our parents stayed at a resort about an hour away. I say technically because she fell asleep around 11 p.m. I was 15 at the time. She was 14. I was still up, watching low-budget sci-fi movies on TV and eating cold pizza as it neared 1 a.m. I started getting a really weird feeling. I couldn't put my finger on it. I just felt uncomfortable. I ignored it for a while until it got unbearable, and I realized that it felt like someone was watching me. My dad had been fixing some windows around the house during the day and had removed a bunch of the blinds, making for an unobstructed view into the house. But we lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood at the time, so no one thought anything of it. I got up to walk around, trying to take my mind off what I was feeling. But as I neared the window on the other side of the living room, where I'd been sitting all night and my friend was still sleeping, I saw something weird on the glass. A foggy spot, maybe 6 inches in diameter. And it was getting bigger, then shrinking, then growing again every second. At the time, I was so wired with paranoia that I couldn't figure out what it was. I put my face just an inch from the window, studying it, and called out for my friend. I told her to hit the switch for the security lights. The foggy spot was breath, and I was staring into a man's face, just on the other side of the glass, only centimeters away from it. My friend ran into the kitchen, screaming, while I stumbled backward in shock. I scrambled for my phone and called my parents, and grabbed the knife still on the coffee table from dinner and held it up in a shaking hand. He pressed his palm against the window, still staring at me, and then disappeared into the dark. My neighbors, shotguns in hand, showed up in less than 2 minutes. My parents had called them, and stayed with us until our parents arrived. No one found anything of the man except for footprints in the garden bed. We moved a few months later. This story takes place when I was 22 years old. I had just gotten home from a long night of stocking shelves at my local grocery store. I worked the closing shift, so I usually got home around midnight. I shared a cheap apartment with my roommate, Mark. We weren't in the best of neighborhoods, but I just felt lucky to have a place to live. That wasn't my parents' basement. I threw my jacket on the coat rack next to the front door and walked into the kitchen to rummage through the fridge for something to eat. I had just pulled a frozen burrito out of the freezer when I noticed something weird. My bedroom door had been slightly open when I walked by the hallway. I know this doesn't sound strange at first, but I specifically remembered closing it that morning when I left for work. I like my privacy, so I always remember to shut my door when I leave for the day. I stepped back into the living room and looked down the hall. "Hello?" I called. There was just dead silence, Not wanting to let the fear get the better of me, I walked across the living room and flicked on the hallway light switch. "Mark, is that you?" I asked. Mark had always been a bit of an odd guy, so I couldn't help but think that maybe he was trying to play some sort of weird prank on me. Maybe waiting to jump out of my closet or something when I entered my room. When I finally got to the bedroom door, I gently pushed it open. The light from the hallway illuminated a large portion of the room. I looked around, definitely feeling the creepy vibes. There was no one there, and nothing looked out of the ordinary. Just the usual, my twin bed, with my nightstand just to the left. I closed the door shut and walked back into the kitchen. I popped my dinner in the microwave and pressed the start button. While that was cooking, I turned on the television, ready to put on a scary movie to watch and relax. Suddenly, I heard a muffled thump coming from down the hall. At first, I thought it was the neighbors or something. They can be pretty loud sometimes, and it's not unusual to hear a loud bump in the night. But then it happened again, and this time, I could tell for sure it was coming from down the hall. "Mark?" I called once more. The microwave beeped just then, and I nearly had a heart attack. "Yeah, sorry, dropped something," I could hear him say through the door. I'll admit, I felt a little better knowing that Mark was home. I walked back into the kitchen to get my food, and that's when my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a text message from Mark. "Hey dude, running a little late here at work. Could you please leave the door unlocked for me?" My stomach dropped to the floor, and a chill ran down my spine. I texted back, "Wait, you're still at work?" He responded only a few seconds later, "Yeah, why?" At that moment, there was another noise from the hall, and I looked up. The silhouette of a large man was standing there, holding what appeared to be a butcher's knife. I turned and ran towards the front door, hearing the heavy clunk of the man's boots behind me. He wasn't running. Instead, it sounded like he was slowly walking, taking his time. I didn't stop to look back. I ran down the emergency staircase and out into the parking lot where I called the cops. The cops showed up just a few minutes later. They went upstairs and searched my apartment, but they said they didn't find anyone. What they did find still terrifies me to this day. As they were searching the apartment, the cops found a note left on the kitchen table, held under a salt shaker. On that note, only one word was written: soon. After that experience, it took me months to be able to sleep on my own normally again.